And it's my pleasure to introduce Dino Sgambellone, the police chief here for Los Alamos. He has been here just over 5 years, and it was my pleasure to be in leadership Los Alamos with the chief, what, a couple of years ago? Best class ever.
That's right.
Yeah, please join me in welcoming Chief Sgambellone.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Okay, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
So when I was asked to speak, I thought that I wouldn't do a presentation, which is a good thing because it's not working. But I did bring some notes to refer to. A lot of this is what I'm going to talk about. You've heard before, quite frankly, and a lot of it's common sense. I think the challenge here, whether it be as business owners, the schools, my own police officers, is that we live in a great community. We live in a very safe community, and that contributes to not being as aware of safety things as perhaps we should be, and thinking that it can't happen here. And if I asked how many of you have your front doors unlocked right now, probably the majority of you would raise your hand. And I don't suggest doing that, by the way. But it's a good thing, but there's a balance there, and it's important, I think, to get refreshed on some of these concepts, and so that's why we're here today. Now, in preparation for today, I just pulled the last 6 months of activity just to show that certain things can and do happen here. Some of these you're already aware of, but you know, we had this indecent exposure guy going around, and he flashed a number of people. We were able to solve that case, but we solved that case through video of one of your businesses in town, and helped us to catch that individual and interview him, and he was subsequently charged and convicted. And I think that's an important concept. You know, first of all, I'm going to recommend highly that not only do you have video, but that you have ID quality video. A lot of the video that we get, I mean, it shows a grainy outline that doesn't really do us any good. I mean, it does, sometimes it does, but the technology has improved so much that it really doesn't, it's not too much of an investment to obtain ID quality video and really help us. And it's not only when it happens at your business, but as a collective, you may have somebody on video like this indecent exposure gentleman that helps us to catch somebody. And you know, Kurt and I were just talking earlier about prevention and how it's hard to quantify that at times, and it is. But you know, had we not caught this guy, would additional people have been traumatized by what he was doing? Or if we can catch the people that vandalized Uncorked, you know, will that help save one of your businesses down the road? So as a collective, I firmly recommend ID quality video. We've had criminal damage to property at 3 locations. We've had 4 either burglaries or attempted burglaries. And we've had some graffiti. Now, just as a matter of semantics, a lot of times the terms robbery and burglary are used interchangeably, but actually they're very distinct crimes. If you come home and somebody's been in your home and all your drawers are emptied and turned over, have you been robbed? Most people will say, I was robbed. That's not a robbery. That's a burglary. In a business that's unlikely to be occupied, that's a B&E. A robbery is a use of force or a threat of force and taking of property. So that's more of the, give me your money, give me your purse. If I walk by and take your purse out of the shopping cart, and you don't know that, and I just take it and walk away, that's a larceny. But a lot of people use those terms interchangeably. I was telling Patrick, it doesn't take much to have an uptick here because we have such a low crime rate, but there has been an uptick, I guess, in some of these burglaries and attempted burglaries. The good thing is we have a very good solvability rate for those cases that we assign, upwards of 90%. So if you are victimized, there's a good chance that we can find them. And I do want to mention, after I'm through here, I'll answer certainly whatever questions that you may have regarding crime prevention or anything you ever wanted to know about the police department but were afraid to ask. I'll answer all those if I can. So obviously, this issue is important to businesses because it can impact your customers, your reputation, your customers' willingness to come patronize. The example I thought of was you've got these skimmers, and if an ATM at your business was known to have compromised a number of cards, do you think that would impact the number of people that want to come to your business and use your ATM? Of course it would. Skimmers are hard to detect. They're these people are very sophisticated. They put this little device on there that looks just like a piece of the ATM, and that's difficult. And so I recommend, if you have an ATM, you know what it looks like, you know what should be there, and if you see things attached to it that shouldn't be there, then you should call us right away. But the purpose of crime prevention is for the sustainability of your business and for your reputation, and so that people continue to want to patronize your business. It says here, the fear of crime isolates businesses, and the isolation increases the vulnerability to crime, which I would agree with 100%. In terms of really laying a foundation for your business, take a hard look at it, your physical layout. One of the challenges for the schools is these buildings were built in the 50s when the challenges at that time for safety weren't the same as they are today. So it creates a number of environmental design challenges, but as Kurt and I have talked many times, you don't just throw up your hands and say, okay, I can't do anything. You take small steps, and you have a goal, and you keep moving towards that goal. And again, culture is just so important here, whether it's in a school setting, whether it's in your business. People just don't want to think or don't think that it can happen here, and so they don't reinforce that culture among staff, among their patrons, and that's very important to do. But your physical layout, your employees, your hiring practices, your overall security, assessing all these things, assessing your vulnerabilities is clearly important in terms of the ongoing longevity of your business. Provide training for your employees. Ensure that they understand your expectations with respect to your security practices. Common sense, use good locks, safes, and alarm systems. Keep up-to-date records, and if you can, with the cloud, I recommend doing that where you store your important records off-site. Same with some of the video capabilities and DVRs. You can have that with your camera systems, but when you also record to the cloud, if somebody takes the DVR, you still have a recording on the cloud. A lot of internal theft issues, they will take that because they know about it and they're aware of it. Establish and enforce clear policies about employee theft, employee substance abuse. crime reporting and your basic security procedures. Of course, we can and do have substance abuse issues here. Maybe not as marked as other communities, but they do happen. Another misconception is that all of the crime that we do have is the result of people coming up the hill. That's not true. The analysis that I've done on that depends on where what type of time frame that I'm looking at, but I would say generally it's probably half, 50-50, whether they live here or not. Burglary prevention, obviously, and I get it. A lot of this is, a cost-benefit analysis, whether or not you're going to put steel frame doors and invest a lot of money into something like that when we don't have people typically coming and prying on doors with crowbars. But obviously, the harder your target, the better it is. It's kind of like your home security. If you have an alarm, a burglar that knows what they're doing can get beyond your alarm, but if you have one and your neighbor doesn't, why am I going to spend time worrying about that? I'll just go over here. So the harder your target is, the better in terms of prevention it's going to be. One thing about alarms, a lot of them now are internet-based. So if I cut your cable line and then I wait, some alarms will, when I cut that, it'll click the alarm. So I wait and I see, did the police respond? Did they find that the line was cut, etc. So there's ways around that, but a lot of alarms will allow you a cellular backup, and I would also recommend that. That way, if your line does get cut, the alarm's still going out over cellular. Obviously, good lighting, unobstructed views. If you have a storefront, you don't want to put so many signs and posters in front that people can't see into the building, that the police can't see into it. Robbery prevention, and I think typically businesses are very friendly here, but I think the more friendly, the more inviting the culture, the less opportunistic some people will be with respect to violence. Again, keep your windows clear, eliminate blind spots. On your security systems, need to know with respect to your employees, if you lose an employee, make sure you change all of that, whatever they had access to, passwords, keys, all those types of issues. Your cash registers in a position where you can observe activity. They talk about using drop safes here. One thing I'll mention that I see quite a bit is people walking to the bank with the bank book or the bag in their hand. I see that a lot, quite frankly. If I'm noticing it, the criminals are noticing it, and particularly if you don't change that time, and they're just, how that doesn't lend itself to some robberies, I don't know, because it's just you're advertising, that you have the deposit. So if you're going to do that, at least hide that bag and make sure you change your times. If you have a large deposit, we will escort you to the bank. I don't know if you know that. Now, depending on call volume, you may have to wait until we free up an officer, but we will certainly do that for you. Credit card fraud, check fraud, you guys have all kind of heard those things. Basically, if somebody's acting suspicious, don't be afraid to call us. Really for anything. I think with drug tips, for example, people are afraid if they call in the suspicious activity at their neighbor that SWAT's going to come in and attack their neighbor. And no, we're going to evaluate it. Maybe they have a Avon business. I don't know, but there could be reasons that are benign, that they have a lot of traffic in and out. We're not just going to come and attack your neighbor. Shoplifting. I don't know. I imagine each of you have your individual policies on that, with respect to detaining that person. I certainly don't feel that it hurts to ask, but I think if they don't want to listen to that, and particularly if they want to be violent, it's not worth it. Same with a robber. I mean, if somebody comes in and wants the money out of the drawer, just give it to them. It's not worth your life over that. If you can get a plate, fine. If you have cameras, as we talked about, that on your parking lot, perhaps they're going to capture that information for you. Vandalism. Like I say, we've had some graffiti. We had the individual throw the rock through the window here a couple weeks ago. So it happens. On the graffiti, we like to take pictures of that because it helps us to connect different taggers. So if you are going to get rid of it, we would prefer that you at least take pictures of that for us. A lot of issues for businesses are employee related. A lot of the higher dollar issues with respect to embezzlement. I would even assume that is occurring and we're not being notified because businesses don't want to highlight that, but it does happen here. And I think that's a challenge here with respect to the workforce and finding good people, but I think I think it's one of the most important things that we do is effectively evaluate potential employees. And of course we go through an extensive background, but I think that's very important, and I think it is for your businesses as well. Where you can, with your policy, with respect to your policy and your employees, where you can build in what's called accountability systems, or what I call accountability systems, that's important. Different types of auditing. I like to say I like to inspect what I expect. So I randomly do professional audits, whether that's of our body-worn cameras or our report writing or that type of thing. And I think from a business perspective, where you're randomly checking your ledgers and your balance, somebody may get away with an embezzlement for a little bit of time, but if you have these systems in place, eventually you'll catch them. And the sooner you catch them, the better, obviously. And so really the majority of this is things you've heard in common sense, but I thought I would leave some time at the end for any questions that you might have. Yes?
So regarding whatever rock or whatever went through the window over at Uncorked, I know they've had video. You couldn't, he posted the pictures on social media. You couldn't see the people, but you could see the car type and that kind of thing pretty well. Have you been able to identify those people at all by the car?
So I can't, we haven't charged anyone, and because it's active, I can't go into a lot of detail.
Okay.
And that helps, having the car. would it be better if somehow we were able to see that plate? Obviously.
Yeah.
So my point about video is, and particularly with the cameras that are available now, they're very, ID quality is not so cost prohibitive that you can't afford it. But just be aware of that. It's the more information that you can get us, the easier it's going to be to solve. And we have solved a number of through video that many of your businesses have, and residences, by the way. Yes.
So would you say monitored alarm or video? Probably video's better than a monitored alarm.
I would recommend both an alarm and the video. There was a break-in a couple weeks ago where they had an alarm, and to our knowledge nothing was taken, and we think it's because the alarm went off and they got scared and they left. No video, but we have good leads in that case though. So again, they can defeat your alarm if they really know what they're doing, but if you have that cellular backup, it's gonna, unless they have a jammer, that signal's gonna go out. And with the video, it'll help us to solve the crime. And again, if it hits your business and we can solve it, then perhaps we've prevented it from hitting yours, and yours. And as a group that are all, you're all here for the same reason, right? And you're all together. Some of that collective thought about crime prevention, I think, is important.
Is there, my video stores for a certain length of time in the cloud. Is there a certain recommended, like, I mean, if you guys have 2 weeks of video, would you go to most businesses looking for information within that time period?
You know, that is a challenge. I mean, because some crime, many crimes, they throw the rock through the window, they rob you, there's a fight, whatever, it's right there, we know about it, you call right after it happens. But some crimes like embezzlement, you don't know about till you do that audit and you check. That's a hard question to answer. We had similar discussions on our body-worn camera. How long are we going to keep those videos? When you say 2 weeks, is that defined by the company you use, or do they allow you to?
Yeah, I think you can pay for different
For
levels
more.
of storage, right? So there becomes a balance between money and.
Yeah, right. And
No
so I would
influence
say
on-
2 weeks is typically, you're going to know about most crimes within that time period.
Right.
And
Well, and I watch our books pretty carefully.
Yeah.
And not one single person is responsible for all aspects, so.
And you know, our traffic cameras, there are traffic cameras at major intersections, but they don't store that video for very often, but we will go through those when we can as an example. But a lot of times it's past the time. The good thing about being geographically isolated for us, and probably one of the reasons why we're able to solve so much crime, is there's only so many ways in and out. And that's true. And if you can evaluate the activity at certain major intersections, it helps to solve the crime.
Yeah, that actually happened one time at our house. My husband observed some people pull up to our mailboxes and wearing Amazon where they're grouped and take mail out of all of the boxes. He walked around the other side, got their plate, and called the police, and you guys apparently stationed yourself at the 2 exits to town. Caught the truck leaving town with a truck full of mail. An officer came back and thanked us, but yeah, I mean, I think there's definite advantage, right?
Great example, yeah.
So I guess my other question with respect to cameras, is there a certain recommended way that I try to place some of our cameras lower versus up at the ceiling, because it seems like it's hard to identify people from that angle.
First of all, we would be happy to do an assessment of any business. If you just call us, we'll come out and look and be able, it's harder to answer that question in general without seeing, I mean, I know your business, but I don't know where your cameras are placed and such. But yeah, I mean, typically, it just depends on your layout. I mean, obviously you want the cash register area, and I think the parking lot is also very important if you can get that. And then just throughout your store, depending on your design and your layout and how much you want to invest in cameras, right when they come in, obviously. But yeah, we'd be happy to come by and look at your specific situation. Yes.
Could we talk a little bit about the break-ins that happened Thanksgiving weekend? It was interestingly well-timed to get the community aware of Small Business Saturday. It wasn't me though, I'll tell you. But I just, honestly, that's why we thought this was good timing to have you come back, Chief, and talk about basics, was because of that. So
In general, let me say that if you, in one of those cases, and again, I'm limited because they're pending, but there was some high dollar items that were not taken, that were right there. Typically, to me, my experience, that would suggest juvenile. But this one that happened a couple weeks ago, we don't feel it's juveniles, and we feel it's related to some activity off the hill. So again, it's like bank robbery. You have everything from amateur bank robberies to professional bank robbers, and how they go about their trade is much different. And the things that banks do to protect themselves against each of those threats is different. Same with you and your local business. But I think it's important to have a general security policy and general awareness, and again, combine it. I get it, you're not going to invest $1 million in security here in Los Alamos, but you can do basic things to protect your business, your staff, your patrons, and just raise that level of awareness that I think is lacking here overall. Yes?
So any recommendations as a business for armed robbery, armed tenants? We have tenants. There's always that threat. We have a code word that we might radio out. But any recommendations for all of us as we have one or two exits in our businesses?
Sure. You know, are you speaking more about like an armed robbery or an active shooter situation, or both?
Either or both.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
First of all, on the armed robbery, I said it earlier, I'll say it again. If somebody comes in and wants what's in the cash register, give it to them. I went to a training once, and I don't know why they did this, but when you came back from break, they would show these videos of people that chose not to give what was in the cash register, and they were shot and killed. And you know, for the $200 that's in the register, it's just not worth it. Same really with anybody that comes in with violence. And Kurt and I talk about this all the time. It's not necessarily the active shooter, it's the custody dispute, it's the intoxicated person, somebody with mental health issues. It's, you know, and so for business, and we teach active shooter, by the way, and we'll do that for any business here, just call us. But it's the same philosophy whether it's a school or a business. It's the run, hide, fight. So have a plan. That's the biggest thing that they're going to teach you. Have a plan so that you don't just freeze when something And if somebody's in your business creating havoc and they're violent, just get out. Just go and call us. The quicker and you can get away from that type of situation, the better it's going to be and the safer it's going to be. But again, for robbery, actual robbery, which is very rare here, but just give them what they're asking for. Rick?
Any reports of skimmers in town? You know, I pull up there and you keep reading the stuff. Now you're supposed to get your phone out and check for Bluetooth and stuff, and it's like, all I want to do is put gas in.
There are active groups in northern New Mexico. I'm not aware of any that have hit Los Alamos, but I would be, you know what, I can't say that. There have been. So, but again, I apologize, but I'm a little limited when something's active. I don't want to say too much. Yes, it's happened. Be aware to the best you can.
I noted, and I forget where I was, Texas somewhere, getting fuel, and I pulled up and the machine actually had a tape strip on it that said if this tape's broke, it may have been opened, which would imply that a skimmer might be in there. Do they have to open it to put the skimmer in it, or can they put them on the outside?
So I'm not an expert in all skimming technologies, but my understanding is, yes, at times they will open the device, and then that means they have to come back to retrieve that because it stores the data. And then there's also devices that they just simply place on the outside. So it's, to my knowledge, it could be either or.
Guess they don't have a little blinking light, do they?
Yes, sir.
Chief, I wanted to go back to your question a minute ago about a robbery situation. And kind of just to put a fine point on your answer, that if somebody comes in, and I've been in a situation, you want them out as quickly as possible, so the calmer you stay, or teach your employees, and just whatever they want, because in our case what happened was one of the employees, without realizing it, made a smart comment, and it made a guy mad who was on drugs. And what could have been a 5-minute situation turned into all day. And it went bad. So everybody should know, not just give them the money, but just as calmly, don't make eye contact. Just your goal is to get them out the door more than anything else, because then you're not in danger.
And typically that's their goal. They don't want to sit there all day. They want to get what you got and go get their next bump. But like you say, when things happen, they get upset, and if they're high, if they're mentally ill, then yeah, that's when bad things happen.
One thing I would say for retailers too is having a point of sale system that tracks everything really well can actually be helpful. I mean, it does happen here. One time, the store was super busy at the time, which of course is when somebody's going to do something like this. But we had a gentleman come in, nicely dressed. He put and we had a line at the counter, and then he put a supplement, which is relatively small and expensive, on the counter, and he said, "I want to return this." And I said, "Okay, well, I'll find the receipt. Do you happen to have the receipt?" And he said, "No, my daughter bought it." So I said, "Okay." Well, I looked in our database, and I knew it was a relatively new item. We'd never even sold one, right? And so then I kind of played dumb, and I said, strange, I can't find it in here. I said, "Do you know how she paid?" And he said, "Cash." And I said, "Well, we don't have a record of this transaction." And he just kind of got irritated, and then he left, right? And then I go over to the shelf, and there was a space where we front everything all the time. So he literally walked over to the shelf, grabbed it, came to the counter, and said, "I want to return this," right? And so having a good point of sale system helps, because most of the time people are in our database, and we literally know every single person who bought any specific item. So that it's helpful, but it does happen here. So we've had that hit us. We also had the change scam. I don't know if people are aware of that in retail, but they try to confuse the person and do more than one transaction at a time. Some people are very slick at it. And in our case, it was a It was a family came in, and they actually were using their small children to distract. And the employee did get confused. We ended up losing $50 when I reviewed the video. And it was funny because he called me right after and he's like, I think something just happened. And I said, okay, let's review the video. And we counted the till that night, sure enough. It was off $50. But someone really slick. There's actually a YouTube video, and I have my employees watch it. It's called Scam School, where this guy shows these videos of how they do it, and he does it to a waitress at a bar and then tells her he just did it. But it's really a good thing to have your employees watch because people can be really good at it.
That's great.
And so I always teach employees only one transaction at a time. You count back the change. If they give you something else to do something else, it's always keep those transactions separate.
That's great.
What are your feelings on a panic button?
So here's the thing about panic buttons. Again, any type of security measure, I'm not going to tell you not to do it. But when you hit that button, typically it's going to route a call to Kansas City or some call center and then back to us. And then, so we've actually done some testing on time delays, and I really don't want to publicize it, but there is a delay, obviously. So you need to be aware of that. But is it one more tool? Yeah. Just be aware that it's not going to hit dispatch immediately, and we're not going to be there in
And
10
it's
seconds.
probably better that they leave before you hit the panic button, because if they're stuck there and the police show up, you never know how they're going to react with the employees. And it could be more dangerous than calling after they're out the door.
What other questions? Yes,
What do you think of Fugitive, Chief?
fugitive.
The game the kids, the high school
Oh.
kids play where they run through downtown late
Yeah.
at night trying to catch each other? Does it drive you guys nuts?
Well, I mean, they call and say that they're playing fugitive. We do get calls from the community, which I think is a good thing because people are seeing something that doesn't look right, and that's good. I mean, what else are kids gonna do?
They could be doing worse things.
Yeah.
Just checking.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to, and what I'll do, Brandon, I'll leave these,
Okay.
but these are our business cards where if something happens in the middle of the night, somebody breaks in, this is the contact information that we would use. It could go both ways. If you're alarmed, the alarm company has that information, but we would like this information. Sometimes it's not an alarm issue, it's something but we need to address. So if you would, if you're not sure if the information we have is updated, please fill this out and make sure we get it back. And also if you have an AED, and I say that because we put that in our computer system, and if we have a medical issue, it'll tell us where that nearest AED is, if it's in your facility. So your contact information and your AEDs. Seems like there's something else I was going to say about that. I don't know, just make sure we have the most current information, and then I'll leave these, and if you have new members, new businesses, you can give them one and have them fill it out and bring it to us.
Great. And so if businesses want you guys to come out and help them?
We'll do a security assessment, we will do active shooter training for you, we will help you out as any way we can.
Okay. These are great resources, everybody, so keep that in mind. Any other questions for the chief?
I think you answered this question, but you've got a job to do. And are there human behaviors that we can encourage our staff to help the police department be more successful, other than what you've already said? Are there trends or themes, or besides being vigilant?
You know, a lot of times, and it's hard to, I guess, teach this, but a lot of times when you think something's wrong, something's wrong.
What was that?
When you think something's wrong,
Yeah.
something's wrong, you know, and I think it's more obvious when somebody comes in and they're under the influence, but I think those mental health issues are a challenge because, you know, you're not there to really diagnose people, but when the smallest thing can set somebody off, like you mentioned, that's a challenge, and thankfully that's rare. And you know, again, I think a lot of things in a community, a lot of these issues are community driven, and I think a lot of our resources in this community are good to address those things and prevent those things. And again, going back to our earlier conversation, have we prevented it? And we don't know. I'm sure we have as a community. But you know, every now and then, just statistically, things are going to happen, and again, have a plan, going back to the active shooter. Whether it's an active shooter, whether it's somebody that just comes in that's agitated, you know, have a plan and react. Yes.
On the reacting thing too, don't, even if you're not the business person there or whatever, don't be afraid to be the one that calls the police. I mean, I had a situation where I'd walked into Rigoberto's one time, and there was a gentleman in there. It took me a minute too to realize what was going on. He was irate, and it was out of control. It was to the point that he was threatening the employee that was there. And so I just quietly walked back out the back and called LAPD, and they came quickly. The guy ended up being arrested, but it was. It took me a minute to kind of come to terms with what was really happening in that situation, because we do live in such a safe community. But like I said, I just kind of quietly backed out, made the phone call, and they showed up pretty quickly. So.
I remember that.
Have you got text messaging capabilities at the dispatch center?
We're working on that. It's called Next Gen Technology. And I believe we're mandated to have that in place by next year. And but a lot of that type of upgrade is state funding driven, and so we're at the mercy of the state in a lot of this in that particular situation and others. So that's coming. At the same time, we're working on an alternative dispatch site for us in case something happens to this one. And so we're I mentioned that because we're combining all of these issues into this bigger project to really update our dispatch facilities. But no, we do not currently have text. Anything else about the police department?
Thank you for all that you do.
Yes.
Do you see an increase in drug use, distribution, et cetera? I mean, where do you think we are on that situation here in Los Angeles?
I think people like to believe that it doesn't happen here, but it does. I think it's even less known because, quite honestly, people can afford it, and people don't get into trouble as much because they have the money to sustain that lifestyle more than other communities. But it's here. I think every community suffers from, you know, the ills of substance abuse, and we're no different. I just think it's easier to hide because of the affluence. Is that it?
Anything else? Well, thank you, Chief. We sure appreciate it.